Jay here, welcome to Models Memories Weekly, episode 193. Models Memories is a show about nothing and is filmed in front of a live studio audience. This is a show where I talk about painting, modeling, and wargame experiences from the week. Now you might be thinking to yourself, Jay, you put out 3 videos a week. How could I possibly have more to say? Well, I do, and here goes. This week, Games Workshop showed off a ton of new things coming in the next year, 2025. And I went to a little spearhead tournament, and I played in it, and I was rolling EOB dice. These dice can be found at EonsOfBattle.com, and EonsOfBattle.com is the best place to support us doing what we do with a membership. Each month, members get a credit that they can use on our new monthly terrain packs or any previous pack we have ever made. For the month of November, EonsOfBattle.com is getting chaotic with the Desecrated Engine, a war machine that can loosely be called a tank, but such an ordinary word does not properly describe the power of this demonic machine. With grasping chainsaw-tipped claws and a tummy blaster that won't quit, this unstoppable engine of chaotic might can roar its way through the battlefield. This insect-like monstrosity comes fully loaded with armor and weapon options so that it is ready to rumble with any army that dares to face it. 2024 has been kind of a slow year for Warhammer 40k fans. I don't think I bought anything this year. I bought one new thing. I bought a lot of new things, but I bought one like fresh from Games Workshop, never before seen thing, and that was the Kill Team box between I know it came with the Gene Stealer called Brood Brothers, because that's what I wanted. But it also, it came with the Voton Squats, because Nick wanted those. But other than that, I mean, there's some cool stuff this year. Dark Angels, Kroot, that one model for the sisters. But there wasn't much for 40k. But Games Workshop teased some stuff coming in 2025, and it does seem like it is going to be a big year for 40k. The first one being the Krieg. When we got the Games Workshop roadmaps and it showed Astra Militarum and they teased that there was some Krieg stuff coming, Sean was super, super excited. And I kept texting him being like, it's probably going to be one Krieg Commissar. It's probably not going to be that Kriegy. Turns out it's going to be really, really Kriegy. There is a ton coming out for Krieg. Krieg was always a sub-faction for Astra Militarum. Astra Militarum is kind of interesting because unlike Space Marines, they have different colors, but they really don't. Like Space Marines, you can have a blue guy and he's an Ultramarine, and that identical same guy can be yellow and he's an Imperial Fist. And that's, even though they're two completely different cultures of Space Marines, they totally are made out of the same box, where Astra Militarum, I mean, there's the Talar Desert Raiders, there's the Catachan Jungle Fighters, there's like all of these, the Mordians, all of these different things are very, very different. And so I thought Games Workshop's probably not going to push it, because if they do, that means that they have to make a whole bunch of new models. And Games Workshop was just like, hold my beer, whole bunch of new models. The Deathcore Krieg are coming to Warhammer 40k next year with some really, really cool stuff. Lord Marshal Varnar Dreer, because he's dreary, because the Deathcore are sad. They're sad boys. This model, Dude on a Horse, is so good. And now that this model exists, nobody will ever buy Lord Solar Leontis ever again, who's basically an auto-include Imperial Guard lists. What's really funny is as soon as this model got shown off, somebody posted it on like the subreddit for Astra Militarum saying, is this guy a good proxy for Lord Solar Leontis? Or no, would Lord Solar Leontis be a good proxy for this guy? Because literally everyone buys any other model under the sun instead of Lord Solar. And Lord Solar is cool. Cool-ish. He's a dude on a horse, and so a lot of people are like, he's expensive, he's an auto-include. He doesn't really match my army because he's a little bit more Roman, and he's got like a lion on his helmet because he's Leo, Lord Solar Leo Leontis. And like, just people don't get super, super jazzed on that model. And now I don't think anyone's ever gonna buy that model ever again, because there's a Krieg guy. There's a guy with a gas mask riding a horse with a gas mask. That is classic Warhammer 40,000. Oh, this model is super gorgeous. I love his tiny little las pistol. And his horse has like front armor with 2 little thingies on it, like nipples. And I kind of think that those nipples are grenades, because it reminds me a little bit of the Black Templar Land Raider, the Land Raider Crusader. It has the like grenade rams on the front. And so it's a vehicle that actually has the grenade strat built in. I like to think that this horse has the grenade strat. Like, it charges over a trench, leaps over the enemy, gets into the back line, and then those little nipples just explode into shrapnel. That would be very, very Kriegy. Oh, it's so gorgeous with the disgusting claw talons. Like my only critique of this model is I don't think the Games Workshop paint job does it justice. It really does look like this thing had a bath way too recently. It looks very, very clean. I think a little bit of dirt and a little bit of grime, maybe some cuts and bruises on the horse, maybe just a darker complexion in general. Oh, it's so nasty and creepy. Oh, and there's like a little flag or something back there on the ground, on the base. Ah, it's so good and it's so spooky. And the Krieginess doesn't stop there because there are the Krieg riders, the Krieg horses, which are different than Atlan Rough Riders, a little bit seemingly. At Adepticon, there was like a used shelf and they had some Krieg riders and I was really trying to get Sean to buy them. And he hemmed and hawed for like 2 days and decided not to get them. And he was right because these are gonna be cheaper than those Forge World resin minis. And they might look a little better. These guys are fantastic. And apparently they can all take power swords. 5 dudes with power swords, even hitting on 4s. There's a little something to that. That's a little bit spicy. And they can also have like the taser goads or the taser lances, which are probably gonna be a little bit worse than the power swords, but that's fine because they can have power swords. Oh, the spooky, scary, creepy claws. They're so good. Oh, and they also have the nipple grenades. Oh, I really hope I'm right, and that means that they're gonna have the grenades keyword. They probably will. These probably would be a good unit to spend your grenade strat on because they can actually get where they wanna go really, really quickly. Some units that have grenades, like there's kind of no point. Like a lot of deep striker units have grenades for some reason, even though you have to appear on the battlefield 9 inches away from your opponent, so you are out of range for throwing your grenades. So I think sometimes Games Workshop makes their rules decisions based on the lore, and then sometimes the lore doesn't match the actual playstyle of the unit in the game. But these guys would be a good one for grenade strat. Or maybe they just won't have grenade strat, and I am looking really, really hard into these horse nipples. But speaking of horse nipples, we got the combat engineers. Sean called this one, and I thought that there was no way they're gonna do the engineers because it didn't even sound like a unit. Like I know they existed in the old Forge World resin, but I thought it doesn't, engineers. Like it doesn't sound like an actual thing, like a usable thing in game. I thought like, yeah, but the Death Corps of Krieg from the Forge World site was a little bit more of like a diorama or like you make the real army, but not a legal 40k army. But no, we got engineers. They're classic Kriegers with their pump action revolver shotguns. Oh, the one guy has an auto pistol that looks like a broom handle Mauser. The flamethrower, I love flamethrowers. Games Workshop make flamethrowers so good in game. I would love to be taking a lot of flamethrowers. And the little Roomba bomb guy, the Boomba, with the little like screw wheels. And that's like, I've seen people make 3D printed robots that use those types of wheels so that they can go over like sand and weird terrain. And it's so fun to see that in the Krieg because it does kind of make sense. Just wheels or just legs. We've seen just wheels and just legs, and the Krieg wouldn't have something that hovers. Those types of wheels make a lot of sense. I like their extra armor. It'll be interesting to see what they do in game. They seem to be something of a little more of like a close combat Krieg, but not super close combat. So it'll be interesting to see like what their role is on the battlefield. I think, I might be making this up, but I thought for some reason that they would have infiltrate or something so that they can be a little bit closer to the enemy. But yeah, these guys are super neat. I love their trench clubs. I like everything about them. They're super, super cool. They're very Kriegy. And speaking of super Kriegy, one unit that I like a lot, but I also don't like a lot, is the new gigantic gun, the siege cannon. I don't like indirect fire. When 10th edition launched, Sean was bringing so much indirect fire, and it was so good. At launch, indirect fire was absolutely busted because Games Workshop, they always know, because indirect fire is a problem every single edition. But they knew, they were like, okay, if you use your indirect fire, it's gonna be -1 to your shooting, and your opponent is gonna get benefit of cover. But then every single unit with indirect fire got to have +1 to their ballistic skill and ignores cover. And then with Lord Solar Leontis, you could increase the ballistic skill, not the to hit roll. And so you could actually double stack the benefit. So you could have your indirect fire hitting on 2s, re-rolling 1s, ignores cover, blast. It was absolutely disgusting. Games Workshop fixed it, they've sort of fixed it. Indirect fire only hits on a 4-up, it's 50-50. But Sean's gonna want a bunch of these things. And they look really, really cool. It's a gigantic gun with a bunch of Kriegers running around it. It has some different weapon options. It's got the little gun. It's got kind of like the multi-barrel gun. It's got one thing that's really, really interesting. It's kind of new. It's just like a bunch of grenades all stacked up. And it kind of reminds me of like the anti-submarine guns that were on like World War II ships, where it was it just threw a bunch of bombs into the water. It's really, really cool looking. And it's probably, in terms of just the look, that one is my favorite for sure. It looks really, really cool. I don't know what it'll do in game, if it'll just be like a ton of strength 4 or strength 5 shots. I do appreciate just throwing buckets of dice. It is super fun. One of my favorite units is Terminators, and Terminators with attached Ancient and Captain, all with Storm Bolters, and then the Cyclone Missile Launchers is like 60 shots plus 46 shots strength 4. It's kind of disgusting. So I hope that this gun is something like that, because at least it'll be funny to watch Sean roll all those dice, as opposed to just a few dice that are definitely going to stop my Space Marines. But speaking of stopping my Space Marines, then we've got the Krieger Command Squad. They look absolutely phenomenal. They have a beautiful banner. They've got a little guy with tinctures and no helmet on for some reason. So is that his hair? He almost looks like he has blue hair, but I think it's just the highlighting of his little bit of hair that he's got. Spooky gas mask. The Krieg Commissar looks so good with his power fist and his little plasma pistol. The comm specialist guy, the servitor, where one servitor is writing down the scroll and then the other servitor behind him is like wrapping the scroll up. It's really, really fun. It's really flavorful. And it's really interesting to me. So now there's 2 command squads. There's Cadian Command Squad and there's Krieg Command Squad. I mean, there is Catachan Command Squad. Like, is Games Workshop planning to one day have all of the different colors of guard represented in plastic on the battlefield? Because that'd be pretty cool. I like the Talon. If Games Workshop ever went hard into Talon and they brought back like the giraffe hippos that you could ride, like I would be pretty tempted. These guys are really, really cool. And the banner just looks great. It's super simple, it's super nice, it's embossed, which makes banners incredibly easy to paint, or just way easier to paint. These guys are super, super cool. But the last Krieger thing that they showed off was the heavy weapons team. And a heavy weapons team, it is what it is. It does what it says on the tin. It's a bunch of guys on, are they on 50s? They look like they're really filling up those bases really nicely. If those are 50s, which to my eye looks correct, maybe they're just really big. Because I want to say that currently the heavy weapon teams stand on 60mm bases, which is kind of big. It's nice for like movement blocking, although they kind of have to be in your deployment zone when you deploy them early game. It's hard to find a really good use for the heavy weapon teams. 50s might help a little bit, but you got the normal stuff. You got the las cannon, you got the auto guns, but you got a flamethrower. There's a flamethrower now. And I think, me and Sean had a big argument about this. I think there's play to the flamethrower. You take the heavy weapons team, especially if they're cheap. Games Workshop make a variable points cost for these things, because obviously flamethrower and las cannon are 2 very different weapon options. With like the las cannon should be way more expensive than the flamethrower. But I think if the flamethrower was cheap, you drop that on your home field objective, you guys camping your home field. All of a sudden, like warp spiders and all of the little like mandrakes and stuff that can deep strike and jump all over the battlefield and try to take your home field objective away from you, you Overwatch flame them. All of a sudden, you've just turned off that entire strategy that so many armies employ. I think there's totally something to the flamethrower, but Sean was absolutely not convinced. He does not want the flamethrower. I want the flame. If he doesn't build the flamethrower, then I'm gonna make him give me the bits and I'll use those flamethrowers for something. The Krieg are really, really cool. It's really cool to actually see like one of the fan favorite things of 40K just getting a lot more attention. It reminds me a lot of like my Black Templar. Black Templar are a successor chapter to the Imperial Fists, but they're kind of the poster boys for Space Marines now because they're so awesome. And it's a little bit that way with the Krieg too. Like Cadians are the thing for Imperial Guard, but people don't care about Cadians as much as they care about Krieg. And so it's really, really fun to see some new Krieg. But one thing that I was not expecting was essentially a new faction for Age of Sigmar. In Age of Sigmar, there's always been the Gloomspite Gitz, that's Nick's favorite faction, and now there is the Glareface Frazzle Gitz. And there's something to them. I absolutely love all of these models. They're so incredibly cool, but there's a little something about these guys. And I've been thinking about this because these guys are wolf riders in the desert, and that's super cool. Wolf riders in the desert, they're little gits, they're running around on their little wolfy steeds. They have a guy that shoots kamikaze, like glider guys that do, the way that their attack goes through is, it's almost certainly going to hit, but it gets less and less powerful the more times you miss your roll, which I think is a really, really fun ability. These guys are absolutely fantastic, but they don't feel like Gloomspite Gitz. I mean, it's in the name. The gloom and the spite and the Gitz, they're cave-dwelling, moon-loving, shroom-eating little weirdos. And these guys aren't that. These guys do feel really, really different. And I'm perfectly fine with sub-factions, but I think Games Workshop needs to do it in a little bit of an interesting way. Like, the Ogre Maw tribes are essentially 3 different factions, but you would, a lay person, somebody who's not well-versed in the lore of the Girth, wouldn't really know, just looking at them, that there's the Mournfangs, and there's the Gluttons, and there's the Lead Belchers. Like, they wouldn't get that there's sort of 3 different factions all living together within this faction. Where I think just taking a peruse at Gloomspite Gitz, you'll see the Troggoths, and you'll see the little Stabbas, and it'll all make sense. But then there's these guys who like don't have any mushroomy stuff going on, and they have a different design to their look. Like they have a lot of wicker in their design, which is so cool. That's super, super cool and gives a really interesting aesthetic, but it's not a Gloomspite Gitz aesthetic. And it reminds me a little bit of like the Orruk War Clans and the Cruel Boys they're 2 different armies essentially, but they're kind of not, and they're kind of in the same battle tome, but like you wouldn't run them together in an army, or maybe you would, but you really wouldn't because they are 2 very different things. I just finished reading the book Gloomspite, and there's a part in that book where the humans are fighting the Cruel Boys, and the Orruk War Clan fleets actually get out of the way so that the humans can go fight the Cruel Boys because the orcs hate the Cruel Boys too. Like they're 2 different factions really, and I feel like these guys are a different faction than the Gloomspite Gitz. Like I would be very interested in collecting and painting these guys, but not so much just the regular Gloomspites. I could do some Spider Riders. I could do some Spider Riders all day long, but the Spider Riders wouldn't even look. I bet I could get them deserty. I bet I could make it kind of work. But these guys are different. Like Games Workshop has a weird. They should make more models, and I do think they shouldn't just make brand spanking new factions all the time, because then you end up with like weirdly unsupported factions. Like for 40K, if you're a World Eaters player, you got 4 kits, and that's all you get, and it feels like that's all you're getting. But I mean, this is already more than 4 kits, so maybe there's a little something to this. But I don't know, it's weird. The Age of Sigmar battle tome for Gloomspite Gitz doesn't have Gloomspite Gitz on the cover. It has the Wolf Riders of the Desert. It's interesting. It reminds me, like in Malifaux, they do a really good job. It's a little game from Georgia that's beautiful, and basically there's factions. There's the Resurrectionists, there's the Arcanists, and there's the Neverborn. But within all of these factions is basically everything under the sun. So if you can just string together any number of nouns, you can be like, I want spiders, robots, and 1930s newspaper boys. And then that's a thing. That really is a thing in Malifaux. And so like whatever you're feeling, it's there for you. Where here I think it's a little bit more like you have to kind of figure it out for yourself. And it's like, what exactly do I want my army to look like? And what is exactly the lore of that army that I want to make? And then how do I make all of these different models fit within that? I don't know, it's a little interesting, and I'd be interested to read this battle tome and see exactly how these new models fit into the Gloomspite Gitz, because they look different. But I really, really like how they look. The new head honcho, Jagged Snarl, is so good. It's a fat grot on a big old wolf, and Games Workshop actually got wolves correct. Usually when they make a wolf, they make it look like a dog, but like wolves actually do have different body proportions to a dog, and this one actually has wolfy proportions, and he looks really, really good. I love his big wicker halo with the sheets of metal. that are wrapped around it. And he's got his widow shield, and he's got his widow hammer, and his hammer seems to be like a drop of metal that is just, you just dropped a lump of molten metal into the water, and it's probably like extra super crazy hard, like a Prince Rupert's drop, and it's just on his little stick. It's so good. All of these guys are absolutely phenomenal. The two grots on a single wolf, which makes sense because you need two grots to fill up all of that space. They look so good. And what's interesting is we actually got the wolf riders a long time ago, like the regular one grot on one wolf. And I remember when those came out, people were like, these are neat, but they don't feel Gloomspite-y. And what was interesting is those guys, they had the same aesthetic. They had these shields with new design, and they had the wicker elements in their banner, but they were on the old bases. Like Games Workshop had they kind of just used like a regular scheme for their Gloomspite Gitz bases, where these new guys are on really nice looking desert bases. I haven't seen Games Workshop do this style of bases before, but it looks really good with the cracks and the little drippies of like an orange discoloration, and then these nice cream rocks and these arid grass tufts, which I don't think they sell. The Games Workshop always fudges it on the bases, but these bases look really good and really different than the Gloomspite Gitz. The chariots. And you get two chariots because your chariots probably suck because it's two dogs pulling a basket instead of like a gigantic war machine. They're so good. I could see doing an army because it's Mad Max. They've taken Gloomspite Gitz and they've turned it Mad Max. And the fastest way to my heart is the Mad Max aesthetic. It all looks super cool. The chariot guy with the little grot who's on top of a boss pole, trying to get struck by lightning so that he can be a little bit stronger. And he's got like a crow stabbed over the spike in his helmet. It's all just so fun and wacky and weird. Man, these guys, they look like they'd be a bit of a challenge to paint just because there's so much stuff. Because I mean, every time you want to paint one of these chariots, you got to paint like 3 or 4 grots, and you got to paint the wicker basket, and you got to paint the wolves. But I could maybe do it. It does look really cool. But I have to maybe hold off because I have so many Age of Sigmar projects. I've been playing tons and tons of Spearhead. I just did a Spearhead tournament where I came in last, but I didn't really. I was playing Yndrasta's Spearhead, which is not a particularly powerful Spearhead. It's a really cool Spearhead, and it's actually called Yndrasta's Spearhead. So you'd think it'd be really good in its namesake, but no, that's just the units that are available. It doesn't do any damage. And so I had trouble. I think over the course of the 3 games I played that day, I think I killed like 4 units, which is not very good. Usually in Spearhead, both armies pretty well grind each other down by the end of the game, but I just could not deal the damage. And Yndrasta kept whiffing on her Thangavar spear, which is also a big problem. But now I have so many Age of Sigmar armies, I don't know, or I have so many Age of Sigmar spearheads, I don't know which one I want to really take into a full army. I mean, I sort of do have a Sylvaneth army, but there's other things calling to me. I don't know. There's also now wolves with Gitz riding them. It's so hard. It's so hard. What could I need to play some TTS is what I need to play and like get a feel for it, because I think my heart of heart says ogres, but my heart of heart remembers what my painting hands had to do, and painting my spearhead for my ogres took like 5 months from the first brushstroke to I still haven't actually varnished them because there's still a couple of things I would like to go back and tweak. So I don't know if I have enough love in my heart to paint up more ogres, but some Beast Claw Raiders and some more Mournfangs. I don't know. I like dudes riding dudes, apparently. And Sigmar gives you a lot of options for cavalry, which is awesome because cavalry in 40k is kind of eh. Most armies don't even have something like cavalry. And a lot of units that do have cavalry are like, it's cavalry wink. Like orcs get Def Coptas, and Def Coptas are cool. I have a lot of Def Coptas, but they're not cavalry. I mean, it's orcs riding a thing, but they're riding a helicopter. It's a vehicle. I'm pretty sure they have cavalry in their keyword. I know Necron Tomb Riders are cavalry for some reason, even though they're Necron like motorcycles. I don't know. The cavalry feels like it should be dudes riding creatures, and Age of Sigmar has a lot of dudes riding creatures. Age of Sigmar people, let me know in the comments below, what do you think of the, I want to get the name right, Glare Face Frazzle Gitz? Are they just the coolest things in sliced bread? Are they really, really, really cool, but don't feel Gloomspite Gitzy? Should they have just been their own faction, or is it perfectly fine for them to be a subculture within the Gloomspite kits? Because it does kind of make sense. I mean, the world of Aish is the Age of Sigmar world. It's Earth. It's got a lot of different stuff going on. And so it does make sense for these different factions to like, yeah, the Gloomspite Gitz who live in the caves are the Gloomspite Gitz. But then there's Gitz living all over the place, and they would take on the attributes of wherever they're living. So some Arctic Gitz. Although I guess the Arctic Gitz would be the Noblars, and the Noblars are part of the Ogrema tribes. So I don't know. It's just interesting to me. And it's interesting that Games Workshop is trying out some different stuff with how they release models. I think it is smarter to do subcultures as opposed to brand spanking new factions, because just making up an entire faction and having it work is definitely harder than, all right, we got these new Wolf Riders. It turns out they could definitely use some Troggoths. Or maybe you shouldn't do it that way. Maybe it should just work at launch and all be correct and make sense. I don't know. 2025 is looking really, really spicy. They even, I didn't even expect this. Actually, Nick and I were watching the previews, and once they got to the books, we turned it off. Not because we don't care about the books, but we don't. But it turns out after that, they showed off some Eldar, and I have some thoughts about those Eldars, but I need some time to let my thoughts percolate, because I am now an Eldar collector. Not regular pointy ears. I do the Dark Eldar, but I don't know. The new models they've shown off have given me some thoughts, and I need to think on it.